So hi everyone, and thank you for joining us on this tech showcase for companies that have joined the NCSC for Startups program. My name's Robert Carney. I work for Plexal, leading their work in Cheltenham with the NCSC, and a big part of that work is the NCSC for Startups program. If you were part of CyNam 21.3, you would have seen me on stage with 4 companies who are coming to the end of their time on the program. And I'm really delighted to be joined now by another 4 companies who are 3 weeks in to their to the second cycle of the NCSC for Startups program. Those 4 companies are Traced, ESProfiler, Lupovis and RankedRight, and we'll have the opportunity over the next hour to hear from each of them and learn more about their technology and their product and see some of their founding teams. There will be the opportunity to ask questions in the chat, either if you're watching live on LinkedIn, not LinkedIn, on YouTube. So please drop your questions in and we'll do our best to get those answered. The first company that we're going to hear from is Traced, and we'll have Ben, the CEO and co-founder, joining us. Now, Traced is a mobile threat defense solution, protects businesses against data breaches and cyber attacks by securing smartphones and tablets without invading employee privacy. So Ben, I'll hand over to you to tell us more.
Fantastic, thank you very much. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning if you're watching not on the live stream or somewhere else in the world. The aim of, I guess, my kind of segment here in today's session is to equip you all with an understanding of the top 3 mobile security threats for businesses and explain how our technology here at Traced provides businesses with the best possible protection against them. So very briefly, quick bit of background about me. I've been working as a technical consultant in networks and cybersecurity for coming up to a decade now, and I've worked for some of the kind of giants in industry, including Intel, McAfee, and Sophos. And here at Traced, we are a team of mobile privacy and security experts who, as Rob said, protect businesses against data breaches and cyber attacks by securing their smartphones and tablets with our mobile threat defense solution. And to explain why we do what we do here at Traced, I'd like to kind of talk very briefly about the genesis of Traced. So I'm going to wind the clock back to 2019. Myself and my business partner, Matt, our CTO here at Traced, but back then kind of friend and colleague at the time, still a friend now, but you know, that was the kind of role. He and I, we used to spend our evenings doing hackathons, whereby we would get a takeaway in, go to each other's flat, get a takeaway in, solve some hacking-based challenges and puzzles and capture the flag events and research into emerging threats. And from these sessions, something that we saw was this kind of gradual increase, this snowball effect of quantity and severity in mobile targeted cyber attacks. And the reason that mobile targeted attacks were increasing and continue to increase on the same trajectory today are because throughout this period, our mobile devices hold an ever increasing amount of access to company data, company information, company systems. And as a result, cyber criminals have kind of shifted focus and are targeting mobile devices at an increasing rate. Back in 2019, Matt and I surveyed the solutions that were available on the market. And whilst there were some solutions there on the market, businesses weren't adopting them and weren't using them. And we identified that there were a number of reasons for this. Number one, the solutions were relying on kind of traditional and old school approaches to technology, like signature-based detection, for example, which didn't offer protection against unknown threats and wasn't able to keep up with the quantity of mobile targeted attacks that continue to persist today. Number two, they were very expensive and complicated, creating barriers to entry for businesses where they couldn't simply adopt them and they couldn't protect themselves and left themselves exposed to the risks of mobile threats. And number three was around employee privacy. So while some security solutions provide businesses with the most visibility over everything that's happening on their mobile devices, this can cause concern and in fact was resulting in many security solutions being rejected on the grounds of employee privacies. For example, employees aren't necessarily comfortable with their employer knowing which websites they access on their personal phone. I'm not going to spell out exactly why, but it's fairly self-explanatory. And the same goes for which apps they have installed in their location, for example. So in November 2019, Matt and I set out on a mission to solve these challenges and to develop a better mobile threat defense solution. And that's what we spent the last 2 years doing, bringing us up to today, where we've protected over 200,000 mobile devices. But very briefly, before I talk about our solution, I wanted to talk about some of the mobile threats that we see on a daily basis. The most prolific of which is absolutely mobile phishing. It's almost impossible to avoid these days, and it often forms the first link in a ransomware attack chain. So, for example, the attackers aren't necessarily trying to get information off the device. They will get the information, but that may not be their actual objective. They may then use that by stealing credentials via phishing and use that for a ransomware attack on a Windows RDP server, for example. When I mention the term phishing, your minds may gravitate naturally aligned towards email, but what I'm about to say might shock you, which is that 87% of successful mobile phishing attacks actually take place outside of email. As secure email gateways and email-based kind of desktop operating system-based phishing simulation training for employees has got better and better and awareness has improved, it's becoming harder and harder for attackers to successfully run their email-based phishing campaigns. Hence, they've switched to the path of least resistance and are now choosing mediums like SMS, WhatsApp, and social media to deploy their phishing attacks. In terms of what phishing attacks look like, well, here's 3 examples that we kind of tend to play around with phishing quite a lot and see what's out there. These are 3 examples that we've sort of seen recently. As you can see, Microsoft accounts for 29% of all phishing attacks. This isn't me picking on Microsoft or Trace picking on Microsoft. The cyber criminals are picking on Microsoft. And the reason for that is because it's a very lucrative target. It's the information that they're trying to get. It's a working set of credentials, an email address, password, and possibly an MFA token kind of combination of Microsoft credentials that they can then use to credential stuff into other systems or gain access to their Microsoft 365 services, for example, and cloud accounts to pull data and deploy their attacks. As you can see on the left, phishing attacks on mobile devices it's not as easy to spot them being a phishing attack. For example, you can see the enter password screen. This looks near identical to the actual Microsoft page. You've got to be really, really kind of alert to be able to differentiate between the two and spot very minor nuances between them. Even the URL bar, for example, is masked there, which Microsoft do on their own page as well. So as you can, and it's reasons such as these why enterprise users are 3 times as likely to fall victim for a phishing link on a mobile device as they are on a desktop. So what are attackers trying to do here? Well, I mentioned a couple of examples there, but ultimately they're trying to gain access to information. They're trying to steal some personal data from the victim, from the target. And this could be forming the first link in a ransomware attack chain, for example. So they go about this in 2 ways. The first of which is kind of following the upper route here. You can see on the previous slide, you know, that spoof website for Microsoft, they may send that out as a phishing link, maybe saying to a user, you know, click here to change your password, for example. And then once they receive that web page, the attacker then gets access to password, email address, MFA token combination, for example. But attackers may also look to deploy malware via a phishing link. If you receive text from the likes of, purporting to be from the likes of Royal Mail or HSBC throughout the pandemic and lockdown, there's a strong likelihood if you're on an Android device that was FluBot that was trying to infect your device. And once infected, it has the ability to spread via SMS and send thousands of SMS messages every single day from using your device to kind of spread that attack. And as you can see, once the attackers have infected a device or gained access to this information, it gets sent back to an attacker and can be used for their attacks. The next threat that we're seeing very much at the moment, and that's posing a significant threat to businesses, is compromised Wi-Fi. So these are typically referring to manipulator in the middle attacks, or man in the middle attacks, also referred to for short. Many businesses have company guidelines to say, you know, don't connect to public Wi-Fi, for example. But most employees don't really understand why they've been told that. And to be honest, even if they do know why, if they're in the back of a hotel and there's no 4G signal, and they've got work to do, there's free Wi-Fi, they'll probably still connect anyway. And these man-in-the-middle attacks can, in fact, be invisible at times to the end user. The end user doesn't really see any difference at all. And this is why, without the right tools in place, again, it's very difficult to differentiate and to equip users with the resources to be able to understand, and the understanding as to whether there is an active threat on those networks. And in terms of how widespread it is, well, we've got the telemetry, we've got the data, and we've identified that about 1 in 20 public Wi-Fi networks are exhibiting some degree of manipulation attack, some sort of malicious interference. And once an employee's device connects to a network with man in the middle, there's a manipulator between the device and the internet. The manipulator can manipulate that traffic. They could look to steal passwords, financial information, or even manipulate web pages to deploy malware, for example, onto the employee's device. And they can then hoover that data up and use it to further their attacks. The third threat that we're seeing, particularly on Android devices, is malicious malware apps. It's not just an Android problem, but I'm a stats guy, so to provide the stats, about 2% of all device infections are iOS, and about 28% are on Android. In terms of what makes an app malicious, well, some apps are created that way. I spoke briefly about FluBot, for example, that's trying to spread and steal financial information. Other such pieces of malware include SharkBot, even TrickBot or TrickMo, which is the Android component that's malicious Android app that's used to steal MFA tokens off of users' devices and used by the TrickBot ransomware gang as part of their banking Trojan, their Windows banking Trojan, to deploy ransomware onto a network. Other apps become dangerous over time, so they suffer supply chain compromises. One that springs to mind is CamScanner, which in August 2019, they suffered a supply chain compromise, converting their innocent document scanning app into a Trojan dropper. And they had over 100 million downloads. That's 100 million devices that the attacker then has at their disposal. And other apps are just a bit kind of fast and loose with their security, often referred to as leaky apps. They haven't taken secure coding practices into consideration. They haven't adopted the correct diligence in terms of security, meaning that data, an organization's data, could be easily kind of leaked and bled out through these types of apps. And the repercussions, we've observed firsthand the repercussions of any of these threats: mobile phishing, compromised Wi-Fi, malware apps. And unfortunately, it's never good. It could result in a ransomware attack, as I've mentioned, and lead to fines from data breaches, reputational damages, lost earnings, and so on and so forth. And this is when I introduce Trace Control, which we've spent the last 2 years developing to provide the best possible protection against these threats. It's an artificial intelligence-powered mobile threat defense platform. It's a SaaS-based platform that uniquely combines mobile threat trained AI engines to protect against malware and phishing, along with zero trust conditional access to ensure that only trusted devices can access company resources. And if any devices do become compromised and put the organization at risk, the organization's data then becomes safeguarded automatically in that process. In addition to this, we layer on top, we factored in employee privacy into absolutely every single feature that we develop. So we consider employee privacy, whereby we only share with the organization the level of compliance data that they need to see as an organization. And to explain kind of these three, are showing our AI engine in action, along with our zero trust and our personal privacy, I guess, kind of feature, I've got a really quick demo that I put together. So here on the right, you can see that we've got an Android device that's protected by the Trace app. On the left, we've got our Trace Control dashboard. Oh. This device is enrolled in personal mode because it's a personal device belonging to Susan Jones. And therefore, it means that we only share with the organization. We don't share anything that could invade the user's privacy. So on Susan's device, she's got access to company resources like OneDrive, Teams, and of course her email. And as you can see, I've emailed her over some confidential documents. But before Susan has a chance to read them, she receives a text telling her to download a Payslip app. And as she uses this phone for email, she is caught off guard and follows the link. Now, the traced app uses AI to identify that this particular app is phishing, tells Susan as such, but for the purposes of the demo, she's kind of ignored that the suspicious message there, goes ahead and downloads the file and installs an app that's actually purporting to be Avast, which this is TrickMo. So this is the TrickBot. This is a TrickBot malware app. You can see once installed, Traced pings up and tells her that it looks malicious, and our deep learning engine has detected this app as malicious and informed Susan as such. On the left, you can see, or in the device, we can see that it's now entered a high risk state. Similarly, in control, the admin has been notified and the device has entered high risk. This means automatically, because the organization has enabled zero trust with Microsoft 365, access to company resources has been automatically revoked. And at an organizational level, all they can see is a compliance status, red health status, and the name of the app that was installed hasn't been shared with the organization for privacy reasons. Susan's received an email telling her that she's about to be locked out of her company resources unless she goes in the Traced app and self-remediates the problem that we've identified, which is her device infected with a piece of malware, putting all of her data at risk.
So Ben, it's Rob here. I'm going to have to interject. We're coming towards the end of your time. Is there any one key message you'd like to share before we move on?
So as we can see, just to wrap up, Susan's uninstalled the app, and lo and behold, her device goes back to low risk, and therefore is back in compliance. And no, her data is the company's data is protected throughout, all automatic and all kind of responsive in that way. So that's it.
Thank you, Ben. So the next company we have up is ESProfiler. We have Lewis, the co-founder, joining us to talk more. ESProfiler is a company that helps boost cybersecurity return on investment by analyzing a product's effectiveness. I will hand over to Lewis to tell us more.
Thanks, Rob. Yeah, I'll walk into a bit of a demo, and I'll start with talking about the problem that we've seen. So a little bit about myself. So my background is in cybersecurity. I've been in that industry for quite a long time. And I've had the privilege of working on both sides of the fence, from a security practitioner using tools and products, and then on the other side of the fence, from a security vendor, actually implementing those products into large enterprise customers. And during this time, we've seen the same recurring themes across some of the top organizations in this country and even broader in the US and States. And 4 key themes really come to mind. You see companies or enterprises investing in product sets and not leveraging everything in them. You see things like capability gaps. So they've bought solutions and products that are not relevant to the issues that company is facing. You see a lot of companies buying solutions and they're not actually implementing them. They're sitting on the shelf. And you've seen overlap in terms of they've bought solutions and then bought other solutions that completely overlap in functionality. And then even at board level and chief security officer level, where they bought solutions, they think they have a level of coverage. It turns out that there's some significant misconfiguration that's been deployed and resulted in that product only operating at a minimal amount of efficiency and security coverage. And what we did is step back and try to ask the question of why do we keep seeing this issue across all of these big organizations? You know, some top people, we've worked with phenomenal, inspirational people in the past, and you still see these same issues again and again and again across organizations. And we've seen waste in the order of tens of millions per year in the top FTSE space customers. And this is a serious problem. Security is getting harder for companies, not easier. And the amount of money required for investment into security products is going up. But the problem is there's a real lack of efficiency in terms of the tool sets that they've got and the return they're actually getting back out of those products. So what we're trying to understand is, you know, why is this? And we think you don't have to actually look that far to start understanding why this is. And I'm not going to pick on any vendors because this is just the way of the security industry at the moment, but you've only got to look at the marketing terminology that's being provided by top security companies, things like data first and a lot of use of the AI terminology. And the problem is with this, how does it actually translate into measurable security? And simply put, if you can't understand what a security investment is supposed to do, how can you understand if you're getting the most out of it? And we think this is where the problem actually starts. So it really boils down to the question of what you're actually buying. And if you're unable to understand that, how can you understand where your security assets are placed, how secure your business is, and where your gaps might be, and how well that's actually working for you? So what we've done is had a long think about how we solve this, and we've come up with a methodology. And this is just something we're internally using at the moment, but it may get a little wider than internal use. But the concept is map, correlate, investigate, and report. And this is all about tackling the life cycle of investment inside security products to try and figure out, you know what, can we make investment in security much more intelligent and get more out of it and track whether or not it's working for the business, so that we can reduce these massive sums of money that's actually being wasted and potentially reallocate it elsewhere to make the business more secure. So MAP boils down into the concept of capturing product capability against threat. And this is really important because it's almost the natural language for discussing security products. If you think about why we go out and buy security, we do that to protect against threat. It's not for regulation, it's not for compliance. Those are just helping nudges to basically solve threat issues. So that is really what security is about. And what MAP is all about is capturing exactly what a product can do at a feature level against security threats. And the way we do that is use industry recognized frameworks such as MITRE ATT&CK. And I'm a massive fan of the MITRE team and the work that they've done in the community. And it provides an excellent foundation for understanding the threats a business is faced against. So if you suddenly start to understand what the product can do and its capability, and then provide an asset lens over it and understand how much it costs inside of your business, you've now got an excellent foundation for understanding not only what you purchase, but what it's supposed to do. And that's a massive leap forward in the industry today of just marketing terminology, especially when you've got purchasing being made at chief security officer level, typically implemented by project teams, and then over the course of a year or so ends up with a business owner. You know, when we're in this world of marketing terminology, that understanding of what you're actually buying, should I say, is not diluted down to the business owner to realize value. So the next thing is actually implementing that. And I briefly mentioned MITRE ATT&CK, and that is basically one of the first frameworks we're looking at supporting. And the problem with this traditionally has been, how do you actually operationalize it inside a business? And especially with when you're looking at purchasing and procuring products. And this is where I want to talk about, apologies, a bit slider there. This is where I want to talk about the work we've done in building a model and standardizing the approach. So we've created this concept of a capability description model. And what that does is, in a very high fidelity way, provide a mechanism for standardizing and explaining exactly how product features, not just one product, but potentially multiple products, provide capability against any framework. So just using the MITRE example, you can basically build a framework description model to describe exactly how a single product or a suite of products can defend against a solution. And this typically fits with this new kind of approach of what a lot of top vendors are doing at the moment, which is selling suites of products to solve solutions such as zero trust and other current trending topics. And what the capability description model is a foundation for understanding that can be built upon. So just to give you an example, just taking a capability description model, you're able to plot what you're purchasing and how that looks against the threat landscape. And this is like thinking about the threat in terms of like a chessboard, and you're buying the pieces to put on the chessboard, and then you're able to understand exactly what they can do, what the threats are, and where the gaps are. And that's, you know, a powerful foundation for understanding security product sets. So what happens next is we're in this position of being able to capture what a product does against a threat, but we need to understand how well it's working inside of a business. And this is part of that life cycle of the product inside a company, and understanding, how do you get the benefit out of it? How do you identify those security gaps? And one of the things that we're looking at is this correlate piece of the MCIR. So we go from the left, capturing what security products and vendors can do using a capability description model. And then we create this concept of a collider, and we bring in data sets such as incidents aligned back to the threat. And this is a really interesting thing, because obviously incidents can be described based upon the threats that unfolded. And once we have that data, we can start to pivot between these data sets. So we can say, okay, Bob in HR clicked on an email that was a spear phishing attachment. We can now pivot back to the product sets that should have stopped that from happening. And this can help with the PIR process and help with understanding, was it misconfiguration, was it capability gap, or was it something we'd not even deployed? And this really starts to build this foundation of understanding of what you purchased. We're overlaying data from the company, this evidence-based validation, and we can even start to unlock interesting things like understanding how external threats are unfolding. What's happened to another organization? Let's say you're a bank in a specific sector, working in the financial sector. One of your peer organizations has just been targeted. You broke that threat down into a series of TTPs against MITRE, and now you can pivot back to your investment and ask the question, are we adequately invested in the correct security products to protect what our peers are facing? And this is a powerful way of thinking about this threat-driven investment strategy that you can build off the back of it. Investigate is then being able to go into those deltas between the evidence-based and what the products are saying. So capturing that, understanding what failed, what's working inside of your business, and any unused functionality, and really start to drag that back out again. And once you've got that high fidelity data part, you can start to bubble that up to the correct people, all the way through procurement to the board, producing this high fidelity information pot that allows businesses and organizations to better understand the products that they're invested in. So I'll probably skip over. One of the ways that we can be integrated is directly into an RFP process. So if a company takes ESProfiler on, they can embed us into their RFP process. We provide the tools and the mechanisms to actually then capture what products can do against security threats that that organization is interested in. And this can have multiple benefits, from not just understanding what you're buying, but simplifying the RFP process from both sides of the fence, from a vendor and a consumer, and then laying the foundation for understanding inside that business to work out whether or not it's working. I'll probably not go too into detail about this, but we facilitate with that with something called a capability request. So I'm not going to go much deeper than that, but that's just to give you an idea of what we're working on in the background. We're already in the FTSE space, and we're already working with customers who are very keen and love the direction that we're taking. So we're pretty excited about where this goes and what this really unlocks. And we're hoping that we can kick off a bit of an industry shift in the way we think about security products and how they're marketed. So I'll probably leave it there if that's okay.
Perfect timing. So thank you, Lewis, for joining us and telling us more about ESProfiler. The third company we'll hear from today is Lupovis, and we have Xavier Belkins, the CEO, joining us. Lupovis is a company that turns your network from a flock of sheep into a pack of wolves using deception techniques. And so I will let Xavier tell us more.
Thank you very much, Rob. Thank you, everyone, for joining today. So I'm Xavier Belkins. I am the CEO of Lupovis, and we do cyber deception. And essentially, it's turning the table on adversaries. And I'll go over the problem. So we all know that it's not a matter of if, but when we will face a cyber attack. Businesses lose £34 billion each year to cyber attacks. Critical infrastructures, 90% of them have been breached in the last 2 years, have suffered cyber attacks, and are currently undergoing digital transformations. The dwell time that we see, between 110 days to 314 days to have an attacker within a network. That's a long time to have someone snooping around, looking at data, maybe modifying accounts, blocking elements that are blocking elements or blocking emails that you're receiving from suppliers. We see a lot of ineffective technology. There's a lot of technology out there, and we still see cyber attacks. We defend the boundaries of our network with intrusion detection systems, firewalls, and many other technologies. And quite often we also lose the vision within the networks. We also have like attackers that constantly evolve their techniques, their tactics and procedures, and that are used to evade all of the technologies that we are deploying. And on top of that, firewalls, intrusion detection systems, EDRs are generating a lot of alerts. 28% of alerts are false positives. 28% are actually threats, and the rest are false positives. So that's quite a lot, and it creates a lot of alert fatigue. I had a quick look at cyber attacks a couple of days ago on Google, and we see like SolarWinds, we see the likes of Log4j or Log4Shell. And a couple of days ago, there was also this report of an attacker attacking Queensland water supplier, and they were in the network for 9 months. So we have a breadth of attacks to defend from, like ransomware or like simply APTs. And when we look at how do we defend from those attacks, we see layered security. So we are essentially building walls. We've got our intrusion detection systems, our SIEM, SOAR, the firewalls, email and web filtering. And for the ones that are lucky, you might have a CISO that run red team, blue team exercises, where the red team might be pen testing quarterly at best. And that gives a picture of the state of cybersecurity, the state of the security of the organization at the point in time, which is dependent on the time the red team has got, depending on the skills of the red team. But ultimately, what this shows is essentially reactive and static security, where we build wall like in a castle, and we hope that nobody else is going to be able to jump over the wall. So to take an analogy on defense, we should look at sport. The great thing with sport is that we always assume we are going to be breached. So someone runs towards us, we respond to the threat, we run towards them. They've got the ball, we engage the threat, we want the ball. We want to deny their position when they're about to get the ball from someone else. And we read the game. We try to understand how the game is played, what other players are going to be doing. And so we try to anticipate the movements of players. Essentially, what we are doing is that we are trying to increase the effort of the other team. We are trying to waste their time. And if we take a step back, we see dynamicity. This is a very proactive defense, trying to understand how an attacker, how a player is going to be able to score against us. So if we take that analogy and we look at military deception, sorry, that's one slide too far. Military deception, we can see this beautiful picture of a Q-boat or Q-ship, and they were deployed during the war, and essentially they were decrepit ships. And when a U-boat would actually surface, because they wouldn't want to actually waste a torpedo on a decrepit ship, the Q-ship would actually change their flags, get their guns out, and sink the U-boat. Fantastic. They were appearing weak. In fact, they were quite strong. And that brings us to it's a trap. Deception is about making the adversary believe that we are weak when we are strong. It's about making the adversary believe something that we want, where we get the advantage. And so at Lupovis, we translate this to the cyber world. You can place cyber deception inward within your network. And essentially, if someone clicks on a link and gets the computer infected, someone breaches your defenses for a reason or another. Maybe there were too many alerts and they got through in the noise. You then get deception within your network, deception that lures an attacker to interact. And an alert is only generated when the attacker or the adversary interacts with the decoy, which creates a high alert fidelity. And so you can correlate this with all of the other logs that you've got. And you know that if a decoy raises an alert, someone or something is going wrong. You can lure the attacker with breadcrumbs, fake files, fake information, fake logins and passwords that lead attackers to attack specific decoys. And that gives you information about the attacker. What do they want? What are they looking for onto the network? The alert also gives you the IP of the computer that has been infected. You might deploy decoys after having had an attack. And essentially, you hope that there was no backdoor. You've basically redeployed decoy and you ensure that nobody is still within the network. Or you might want to deploy decoys outside of your network. And outside of the network, you're going to start getting the TTPs, the tactics, techniques, and procedures. You're going to get information about who is after your infrastructure, who is after you, how are they doing it, what services are they targeting, how are they targeting those services. Informations that can help your blue team understand or get a better picture of what is out there. Help the red team for the next red teaming exercise and inform your board. Informations that are very important, but you now have added dynamicity. You now get all of that information continuously. So how do we deploy? Essentially, we have a deception platform in the cloud. You deploy virtual machines over your network that are services, operating systems, and that look like targets, that may contain information interesting to an adversary. We collect data of interactions and pass them to our analytics engine for continuous improvement and pass them on back to your blue team, red team, and they can use it for the board. So pen test was very periodical. Deception is continuous. The blue team will get alerts with high fidelity. The blue team will get TTPs. You can allocate budget better, get a better vision of the threat. And all of that information can then be passed onto the board for action from the C-suite. So if you're interested in learning a bit more about deception, I would recommend a couple of books. In the past, deception was called honeypot, and the only difference is that honeypots are standalone and deception is about the entire environment. So if you want to learn more from an academic perspective, I would recommend Cyber Deception, Building a Scientific Foundation with the next advances in deception. If you're looking from a practical standpoint, we've got Honeypot, Tracking Hackers, which is a fantastic book, which provides a lot of information. And then we've got like the latest book from Chris Sanders, which provides an overview of how deception can be beneficial to a business, to an organization, how hackers or attackers can be tricked into believing something that gives you the advantage. So in conclusion, deception has a number of proven advantages. You can turn your network from a flock of sheep to a pack of wolves. Deception is a framework that will help both your blue team and your red team to take advantage. Before, you had to be right 100% of the time. You had to hope that your defenses were going to hold up against attackers. Now, attackers within your network have to hope that they always take the correct path, because the moment they trip a decoy, an alert is raised. We constantly evolve deception. Deception is something that continuously evolve with the architecture of your network, the services that are on your network. And Lupovis provides this proactive solution that adapts as your network adapts. And that's me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Xavier from Lupovis. The fourth and final company that we have joining us is RankedRight, and we have Thomas McKenzie, the CEO, joining us to tell us more. Now, RankedRight is a company who help reduce admin and increase action in your vulnerability management process. Thomas is joining us now and able to tell us more.
I'm on mute. There we go. Hopefully you can hear me now. Hey everybody, my name is Thomas McKenzie, and I'm the CEO and founder of RankedRight. As Rob mentioned, we work in the vulnerability management space, and our main mission is to help organizations, all types of organizations, gain a greater control over their vulnerability management. Our kind of main route to market is via managed service providers and security service providers. However, we do work direct, and I'll talk a little bit about an announcement that we made today, and how that could help you and your organization if you're looking for a solution like this. We were founded just over a year ago now. We're an angel-backed SaaS business, and as I mentioned, focusing on helping organizations get a better understanding of vulnerability management. My background is spent over 10, 11 years in cybersecurity now, working both for consultancy firms and also in end customer roles too. My last role was focused on vulnerability management, and this is kind of where my passion for the issues and the problems that revolve around vulnerability management came from. So let's talk about the problem now. It used to be the case 10, 15 years ago that you would scan your environment for a number of vulnerabilities, and you would find a handful, and you could go away and you could patch them or fix them and kind of then move on to the next scan and do it, again and again and again. But over the last decade, there's been a 20% year-on-year increase in the number of disclosed vulnerabilities that basically are impacting people and their environments every single day. And there's no way in hell that you can actually go ahead and remediate that number of vulnerabilities. When I was at IBM, the average number of vulnerabilities that we were identifying was somewhere in the region of about 1.7 million with every single scan. Now, obviously, that's IBM and huge enterprise environments, but even for smaller organizations that we're working with now, they have a huge issue with the number of vulnerabilities that they have, even across a small number of assets. Now, because of that, organizations are spending a lot of time trying to prioritize their vulnerabilities. We released some research today, in fact, that said over 96% of organizations think that prioritization is a key part of vulnerability management. But alongside that, we're seeing that if you do this manually, for every 250 assets you do vulnerability prioritization for, you're spending somewhere in the region of about 7 hours per week. And it kind of it goes bigger and bigger. And on average, we're seeing organizations spending at least four days per week on vulnerability prioritization. Now, when you talk about smaller organizations, what happens really is they offload that problem to either a managed service provider or to a managed security service provider. The thing is that vulnerability management, as it stands today, is quite a commoditized service. You're delivering it with the least amount of resources as you possibly can. And it's extremely difficult for a managed service provider to kind of differentiate their service and provide value to the end customer. And that's a big problem, because that means that there's no innovation within vulnerability management. And what we're seeing at the moment, one of the biggest problems in this space is a lack of customization and transparency within the current technology that are available to the end customer and to the managed service provider actually dealing with the program. So that's where we've come in to help. We help organizations and their service providers optimize and or improve their current vulnerability management program. And we do that in 5 simple steps. The first is ingestion. We have one customer as an example that, due to their lack of budget and how segmented their network is, they're actually scanning their environment utilizing numerous different tools. So they use 2 instances of Nessus internally, scanning different parts of the environment. They're utilizing Tenable.io for external scanning. And then for another portion of their environment, they're using Fortinet fabric agents. That's a lot of data that is very different. Trying to manage that across multiple tooling is quite difficult for them. So what we do is we ingest and normalize that data so that it all can be viewed under one pane of glass. The next piece is the enrichment phase, where we gather vulnerability intelligence and vulnerability data from numerous sources and bring it all in. We then help with the prioritization, and we provide a truly customizable platform that allows organizations or their service providers to deliver prioritization in alignment with your risk appetite. We can then help with delegation of vulnerabilities for the remediation phase. And then ultimately, as a wraparound, we help manage the whole program by understanding at what stage different vulnerabilities are across the program, and if things are open, closed, if risks being accepted, etc. Let's dig into a little bit of these particular steps. So first of all, ingestion. Right now we support the main scanning vendors, and due to the fact that one of our customers utilizes fabric agents within Fortinet, we also support that too. Our kind of aim with the platform is to basically develop integrations as and when people come to us for certain things. So if you utilize OpenVAS, which we don't support today, then let us know and we'll build an integration for OpenVAS. It isn't difficult for us to do that. So what we do is we take this data, we normalize it, and then we present it in a way within our platform that's viewable no matter where the source of data has come from. It's important to note that at our stage right now, our focus is purely on infrastructure scanning, infrastructure vulnerabilities. We have a roadmap that kind of covers off other types of vulnerability data as we move forward. Then we work to enrich the vulnerability data that you provide us. I don't know why that's happening. There we go. Then we work to enrich the data that you provide us. So the way that we do that is we're gathering constantly data from various different feeds and databases across the internet. We also have a partnership with a company called vFeed that provide us with data too. But every single day, at least 4 times per day, we're updating our data sources. And what we do is we then attach that data to the vulnerability data that you've provided us. So as an example, we can provide information about whether a vulnerability is not just exploitable, but whether the vulnerability is weaponized. We can also say where those weaponized exploits are so that you can go off and download them and try them against your environment for kind of manual verification. In certain cases, we'll have IDS and IPS rules helping you to do kind of virtual patching and compensating control fixes. We map vulnerabilities to the MITRE ATT&CK framework so that you can then, utilizing the TTPs, as Xavier was talking about earlier, you can then determine based on your risk, like, well, this is where we see a problem right now. We provide a lot of additional information from the vendors as well, and that data essentially gives you more information about the vulnerability, as well as the ability to prioritize, which is where we come on to next. Within the platform, we have what we call the triage library, and the triage library allows you to create what we call triage rules. The triage rule is essentially a place in which you can determine, based on your risk appetite, how you want to prioritize your vulnerabilities. Now, we have customers doing different things, and that's kind of the flexibility of our platform. First of all, you could create a rule just for your entire environment. And you could say, this is how I want to prioritize my vulnerabilities, and this is how we're going to do it for everything. However, we have other customers that have different lines of business or different priorities, and they build rules specific to those lines of business or to those priorities. And this is an example from a demo that I did a few days ago, where I created a rule like on the fly for a demo. And they, to give you an idea, they're a company that has to adhere to PCI. They have a Windows estate and a Linux estate, and that's how they segregate kind of the remediation actions within their environment. And in the space of 30 seconds to a minute, we'd created this kind of test rule within the environment. So the first thing here that you can see is the tag. So what we're saying is we want to focus on the Windows environment. It's important to note that when we extract the vulnerability data from the customer's vulnerability scan data, we also are extracting asset information as well, which allows you to apply custom tags or asset criticalities to the assets themselves, which is where this kind of tag has come from. We know that it's a Windows machine because that's the way that it's been tagged. And if we drop down to the bottom where we look at the rules, you can see that we're saying, well, let's focus on vulnerabilities that are CVSS 4 and above. Let's look at things where it's easy to attack them, but no privileges are required, where it maps to the reconnaissance tactic within the MITRE ATT&CK framework. And the confidentiality impact is high. It's going to cause a problem if this happens. And then finally, where an exploit is available. Now, in this particular demo that we ran, there was over 7,000 vulnerabilities. And this was something, that we determined together that it was this would create a rule that was of huge concern to them. And out of 7,000 vulnerabilities or more, we'd whittled it down to 6 vulnerabilities that they had to focus on right there and then. Other examples are, focusing on internal top threats, where you just look at your internal estate and look at things that are considered high and critical. We've had one customer focus on Chinese state-sponsored attackers and use threat intel that they've had of what Chinese state-sponsored attackers are doing to then create a rule that aligns to that. The beauty of the platform is that you can create as many rules as you want, and you can then track your performance against those. When it then comes to the delegation element, you can then either delegate a rule to another user in your organization. When they authenticate to the platform, they only see the vulnerabilities that you want them to see, and also prioritized in the way that you want them to be prioritized. Now, we have role-based access, so you can just provide access to a subset of the vulnerability data and actually then allow them to prioritize it themselves, depending on how your organization is split. Or as a service provider, if you want to give the end customer control of how they prioritize, then you can do that too. And then finally, it's the management aspect. You may not have caught it, but on one of the earlier screenshots, we had an audit trail. We keep a complete audit trail of every vulnerability that comes into the platform from open to close. And what that basically means is you're able to track all of the actions that have happened from the moment that vulnerability has been identified to the moment it's been remediated. And you can manage things like risk acceptance, risk deferral, where we remove a vulnerability and bring it back. You can then talk about remediation actions and map that to user-defined SLAs, so you can track to see how your organization is meeting their SLAs for vulnerability remediation. And then you can mark things as remediated. And as we ingest new data into the platform, what you'll be able to determine is, well, has this actually been fixed? But the most powerful thing we've seen is when a vulnerability has been fixed, but then actually, if you look later on, it comes back. And we keep that persistent audit trail and all of the actions that have been taken so that you know what's happened, and you can then start to kind of debug or triage that specific problem in its entirety too. So that's kind of a high-level overview of what it is that we're doing at RankedRight. As I mentioned, our focus is mainly on managed service providers and security service providers. However, we do work direct as well. Actually, today we released a free version of the RankedRight platform, which we call RankedRight Essential. It's basically the exact same as what I've gone through with you. There's only a couple of limitations in there with regards to the number of users and the number of rules that you can create, but there's no limit on the number of assets that you have. So if you're a huge organization that is interested in looking at RankedRight, you can get full value out of it. I think one of the most important parts of kind of the ethos for what we're doing is the concept of secret algorithms. Now, if you look at some of our competitors and some of the service providers out there today and how they work, is they will basically tell you that they've prioritized your vulnerabilities based on intel and guidance that they've got in the best possible way. The problem is you don't actually know what it is that they're doing. And I remember, if I think back to when I first started consulting, I remember going to my first customer, and the guy who was basically teaching me the trade said to me, it's never your job to tell your customer what their risk appetite is. Risk is a personal thing. It's in the eye of the beholder, so to speak. And ultimately, if you go in and tell them, what their risk is, as opposed to working with them to ascertain that risk and ultimately build solutions around their risk appetite, they're basically going to laugh you out the door. So we've come into this without kind of any agenda, no secret algorithms. We want to help service providers build their own intellectual property within our platform so that they can prioritize and work with their customer in any way they see fit. But ultimately, it's about the security of the end customer. And no two customers are alike, right? No end organization is the same. I remember at Visa, we were very concerned at the time, this will show you when it was, very concerned about Anonymous and Lulsec, but we were less bothered about other threats. So it's very important. It was very important for us when we were doing vulnerability management that we focused on that as a concern. And because within the RankedRight platform, we're keeping everything up to date, the vulnerability intelligence data is updated at least 4 times per day. You can see proliferation of exploitation. You can see, well, this vulnerability had no exploits today, but the next day it may have 10. And I'm thinking of recent news that I'm sure some of you on the call have been working very hard on. Look, if you're interested in a demo, or if you just want to chat, learn more about what it is that we're doing, please get in touch with me. My email's there. And if you want to sign up to RankedRight Essential, you can see the link in the bottom left. Just go there and try it out, and we can create you an account and get you onboarded, and you guys can play around. Really appreciate everybody's time.
Hey, thank you, Thomas. And so RankedRight was the last company that we're hearing from today. So I just want to sort of say thank you to all of them for joining us and doing such a great job in explaining their products and technology. I want to thank everyone who's joined us on the live stream, and there's been plenty of activity commenting as well. So thank you so much for that. Thank you if you're watching this on YouTube at a later date. Specifically, I also want to say thank you to Elle from CyNam, who's in the background, making sure all of this works and happened and we were prepared for it. So thank you, Elle. If you want to reach out to any of the companies that you've heard from today, please either go directly via social media. If you want to come via Plexal or CyNam, please do so. You can find us online, LinkedIn, all of those places. And if you're thinking of applying to NCSC for Startups yourself, then please check out the NCSC for Startups microsite. You'll find the application form there. We'll be having another intake at some point in the new year. I guess that leaves me to say, again, thanks for joining us. We're, 9 days from Christmas. So hoping you all have a very merry festive period and hopefully see you in person in the new year. Thank you again.